Hi, my name's Kitty Anderson. I'm the director of Lux Scotland. And for those who don't know, Lux Scotland is a non-profit agency supporting developing and promoting artist moving image practices here in Scotland. And we work with a wide range of partners and are delighted to be working with Document on this event, but also just to be positioning our work within this kind of a context of human rights. So it's really wonderful to be working both with Ed, but also to be able to have this sort of wider context for his work. So actually, although I think, Sam, you just said I'm going to explain more about the event, I think I'm going to hand over to Ed to explain more about the event. But I'm very pleased to introduce the filmmaker and researcher, Ed Webb-Ingall, who will be hosting today's event. And its title is Forming a Residents' Association, the Role of Video in Response to the UK Housing Crisis. And we've been working with Ed for the last year or so. I was actually, when I was trying to think back, I was going to say a few months, but it's over a year, Ed. So it's a fully fledged relationship now. Yeah, on this project, which is called The Role of Video in Response to the Housing Crisis, together with Grand Union in Birmingham, Nottingham Contemporary and the Rule of Threes in Liverpool. So Ed, I'm hoping you can say a bit more about the sort of wider project, or however much you're happy talking about it within this context. And Ed regularly collaborates with groups to explore underrepresented historical moments and their relationship to contemporary life. And then this issue seems more pertinent than ever before. So, referring to it as a historical moment feels, yeah, odd, but very important to discuss. But Ed, maybe on that note, over to you to say something about the project itself.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks Kitty, and thanks Sam and Document and Lux, David at Lux. Yeah, it's weird. This is the second public sort of moment of this project, I guess. Not last October, but the October before, I co-ran a project with Charlotte Proctor from Lux in London, actually, called All You Need Is an Excuse, which was more a different kind of project. But at the end of it, I did a public event, I guess, kind of launching this new piece of research I was doing called Forming a Residents' Association. So research kind of comes out of a number of things, I guess, coming together at the same time. In 2016, I co-founded the London Community Video Archive, which is an online archive of over 60 community videos from 69 to about 85, 86, which was set up with Tony Dowman and Andy Porter. And it was really a place to put a lot of community videos that I was researching for my PhD and for my filmmaking practice, and that Tony and Andy worked on firsthand. And it was like a funded for a year project, and the funding was to preserve and digitize videos from that period up to 60, I think it was, interview people that made those videos, train people to do those interviews, like oral history interviews, and then to run a public program of 30 or more screening events over the course of a year. And that was where my main job was, sort of programming the videos in contemporary context. And I guess after that project ran and I finished my PhD, I kind of had, I feel like I have an understanding of that methodology of like a specific approach to video making, which is collaborative and collective, and very much from different communities. And I have been kind of working in different ways, trying to think about, I guess, the use of that methodology. And a large majority of the videos in the archive are around housing and shining light on different housing problems. And some of the earliest community videos earliest use of video and activism were around housing, whether that was about protest or filming actions, or this specific approach that was called damp tapes at the time, where people living in poor housing conditions would use video to record their poor housing condition, not just damp, but broken windows, graffiti, like things in their house they weren't happy with. And they would collate those videos into one video and march to the council office or the housing office and put the monitor on the desk and play back these compilations. So rather than these individuals going and complaining that could easily be dismissed, that the people in power would be sort of bombarded with this sort of series or this montage, this compilation of lots of different problems in the same place. And I was really fascinated by the way that video could be used as a tool to represent this sort of these underrepresented positions. All this to say is that, like, that was going on, this research, and trying to think about what next in terms of how to use the archive. And then living where I live in London, surrounded by gentrification and social cleansing, just being really aware of the issues going on around me. And I guess the way that housing is not just housing is central to mental health, physical health. It's also an issue around race, which was brought up yesterday, and around class. And I guess for me, it just felt like, and everywhere I looked, everyone I spoke to was struggling with their housing in different ways. And so I wanted to start to think about how video could be used as a tool, specifically in response to the housing crisis, and not just, and to see what that would even mean, I guess. And so this one video in the archive, one of the earliest ones we have from 1974, is called Forming a Residents Association. And it literally is footage of, and it kind of step by step explains how a group of squatters, namely Sue Hall and John Hoppy Hopkins in North London, around Camden, arranged a meeting because they were all living in short-term housing or squatting on the same street. And there was this plan for redevelopment in their neighborhood. And so the only way they'd be listened to is if they collectivized. And so they decided to form a residents association, which was the first ever, as far as I know, formalized residents association of people living in this precarious way. And the video, as you'll see when we play it, is like, it just explains really simply how they ran the meeting, but they also filmed the meeting. And there's a moment in it, which I always think about, which is where in the meeting, someone says, we can't just keep having meetings. It has to be meeting action, I think is the words he uses. And just thinking about, like, for me, that's such a like simple way of describing some of the issues that I come across when I go to my housing meetings. It's like this, trying to find this balance, I guess. It's just one small tool, if you like, that kind of, I found really fascinating as a way of just like, oh yeah, that's a really like good bit of advice, if you like. And so I just was beginning to think, how can, I guess one of the questions I then asked myself is like, what would this video look like if it was made now? Who would make it? Who would want to see it? And what's really important for me when I make videos, which I rarely do, it takes me about 3 years to make a video, it's just like, at the point of pressing record, I want to know who my audience is. That's really important to me, to think of it as something that has an audience before it starts. And I really, I've been going to a lot of different housing activist meetings around London, around where I live, to get involved mainly around the closure of Ellison and Castle Shopping Centre, and then learning more about housing activist groups in my neighbourhood. And noticing, I think I went to one public event, I think it was at Four Corners, and there was someone from Focus E15, someone from, and there was like 3 or 4 different housing estates coming together and talking, and I realized that these kind of moments of them actually talking to each other are quite rare at that meeting, because mostly you're just stuck in your own neighborhood, just trying to fix what's going on around you, and don't have that energy necessarily to apply yourself to a bigger conversation. But what was learned and shared in that room felt really like there was so much knowledge in that room that I thought was really powerful and could be useful to the people. And so I felt like, whenever I said, I felt like Carrie Bradshaw. So I got to thinking, what would have it, so I was like, how can I, as like someone who identifies as like primarily as a filmmaker, and think about how I could be useful in this current moment? And so I guess there's a slightly Robin Hood-ish element to thinking where money is and the art world, and thinking, how can I like use money from, I guess, the arts to build these relationships and networks that could be useful outside of the arts, without losing any of the politics or the activism or I guess the purpose of the project. And so luckily, unfortunately, I found very sensitive people in these different organizations who were also interested in these same conversations of how do you build relationships with the communities around you as arts organizations, who are often like centers for gentrification, and used as kind of like the forefront of what then becomes gentrification in lots of ways, how our artists are often used in that way. So I guess I'm very cautious of that relationship and want to continue to be sensitive to it. So what we've done over the past year is form a kind of research group of housing activists and researchers from the cities that Kitty mentioned, so Nottingham, Birmingham, Glasgow, and Liverpool and London, and we meet monthly to talk about what's going on in our neighbourhoods. And to start to build that research, for me, feels really important to think about, and to just open up like that question in like a sort of small way, and start to see how video could be useful. And this is just the invitation from Document and from Lux Scotland felt like a good moment. We've had 3 meetings, I think, and we're having another 4 more. I think that's right. and each meeting is themed around a different element, and then we sort of discuss that, and a different person chairs each meeting. We have some people in the room, including Tamima. Oh yeah, so also I should say, so in the room with me are Joey and Tamima, and they're going to be more involved after the screening, but I wanted to introduce them. So Joey was speaking yesterday at an event about the film We're Still Here, which was really incredible, which I think we'll probably talk a bit about afterwards, after the screening, from Living Rent Glasgow, and Tamima, who's involved with WASH, Women's Asylum Seeker Housing. Yeah. Wait, we can't hear you, Tamima. You go.
Housing project.
Housing project. That's it.
Asylum Seeker Housing project.
Yeah, that's it. WASH. And Tamima's been coming to the monthly meetings. So we'll talk more with them after the screening. I didn't plan any of this, so I'm just mumbling. I'm going to just check my notes before I post the links in the thing. Yeah, so I guess this period of research is about building up towards thinking about what's next, and thinking about how a video can be a tool, potentially a tool of some kind. I guess there's a couple of things going on when I think about that. It's like, especially from some of the research, like there's two things, like a video can be a tool and it can be sort of educational, but it can also be a tool for consciousness raising or building solidarity, developing forms of self-representation. It can also be a tool for documenting actions or making your own media in response to mainstream broadcast media. So this idea of alternative media. It's also really important sometimes as a tool for storytelling, and also for like archiving and saying this happened. Like the name of the film yesterday, We're Still Here, really speaks to that idea of like of how video is a way of just showing that you exist. So those are some of the things I've been thinking about in this research, this slow research. So I thought what we would do is there's two videos. Sam, did we work out how long they are together? I forgot if we did.
I think it's about 25 minutes combined.
Okay, great. So what we're going to do is we're going to post, because streaming through Zoom is a bit unstable. So we're going to post the links to watch two videos in the Zoom chat box. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to post some, let me just see how many people are in this room. Oh, there's quite a few. Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post these kind of questions, these sort of maybe provocation is a bit strong for a Sunday morning, these kind of questions in the chat box. And then Sam's going to post the links. And I just wanted us to kind of think about these questions as we're watching it. And these are kind of questions I usually ask myself after a period of research, when I felt after the research has sort of led me to a place of thinking, yeah, there is a video here. I'm not sure what it is exactly. So the questions are, what would a film about housing in Glasgow be about? Who would make it? What would it look like? And who would it be for? And these are questions that feel really, like, I guess quite simple in a way, but they're ones I like to begin with, because I think it's important to like think of those different stages. But just thinking about, and we're going to talk more about this after, but I guess for me, there's been some amazing films made over the past few years looking at the housing crisis. Paul Singh's Dispossession, about trying to, I guess, explain like what's gone wrong, if you like, since, I guess, I mean, roughly since the right to buy in the 1980s is like quite a key moment in like a shift in how housing has been understood. And other films that kind of look at the current moment and what's going on. And I think one of my motivations is to think about what a video would look like that was really from the housing movement, that was also for it, that could build solidarity and also share methodologies. And I guess one of the things I'm quite keen to do is think about how a video. Oh yes, I should finish that bit. So this links into that. So Forming a Residents Association video was made in 1974, and then because it was on video, it was portable and able to be played back. So it was actually then shared with other housing groups around, who then could use it as an instructional tool to form similar residents associations. And that was the key thing I left out. And that was the thing that kind of motivated this project. Like, what would that look like now? Like, what would be the thing that could be shared and be useful? Like as a video that isn't just, not to say this is a bad thing, that isn't just about the housing crisis, but also is from it and for it, and is building, I guess, as a form of education and the sharing methods. So that's kind of what I've been thinking about in that long garbled conversation I just had with myself. So the idea is, so it's like 12:18 now. we'll watch Home and Dry first, which is, I think it's like 6 odd minutes long, or 8, something like that. Yeah, but so between them, they're 26 minutes long. And then we'll watch Forming a Residents Association. Then we'll come back, and then Tamima and Jerry will respond, hopefully have all the answers to those provocations. And then we'll be done. No, and then we can all, just to have that conversation and think about what that, I guess, yeah, what our responses to those questions might be is, and also obviously if you have any other questions about the project or where it's going, we'll talk about that too. But also it'd be great to hear a bit more about how Joe and Tamima have been, I guess, thinking about film or thinking about what might be useful in response to the work that they're doing in their in the different ways in Glasgow. Okay, I think I've mumbled on enough. Thanks everyone. So let's just start by like clicking on the Vimeo link, and then we'll mute on this, right? And then we'll just watch it. And then so 26 minutes from now, then 20 past 4, so like basically around 1:45, we'll come back and chat. And maybe we'll just like, yeah, we'll give it a few minutes, and maybe just like, yeah, just after 1:45. How does that sound? I guess maybe as a starting question, if it's not too vague, Tamima, have you seen Home and Dry before? I can't remember if I've sent it to you before this event, the animation of the Leeds Animation Workshop one. Have you seen it before? Tamima? Tamima, can you hear me okay? Maybe Tamima and Jerry could just come off mute for a second. That would be kind of cool. Then I could just chat more casually. Maybe I'll start with you, Jerry, then. Have you seen Leeds Animation Workshop before?
Aye, so I watched it about a month ago. I think the first time you sent it to me, that was the second in the art. And I think it's an amazing film. I mean, I really, really like it. And I think in a lot of ways it's a lot more radical than a lot of stuff I've seen maybe more recently. Yeah, I mean, just the politics behind it. I mean, it's little things. I mean, it's like directly like attacks home ownership. This idea of mortgages, for example, which, you know, is often not part of the conversation. You know, it links it into, you know, to war. It links it with all these different workers' struggles with Grunwick at the end of the film. And yeah, just a kind of vision as well, that it's not just to build more houses, or just a wider vision of what public housing can be. And actually that, yeah, I mean, yeah, people affected, we need power. We've got different visions, you know, that need to be asserted. And yeah, just the way it looks as well. I mean, just with the music and the animation, you know, it's not just this kind of straight, kind of boring explanation. So yeah, I think it's, yeah, I really love that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess for me, I've been working with a group in London, a group of women mainly living in overcrowded housing, or one of them in temporary housing, and we use that as a tool, just as a different, because I think it's not polemical, I guess is what I really love about it. Not that polemics are bad, but there's something like when you use the word radical, I think there's something also really subtle about that, and maybe that's what also is. What do you mean by the word radical?
I guess just the kind of, for me, just the politics behind it are kind of deeper than maybe a lot of films that kind of seek to like explain the housing crisis or what it means, you know. So when you hear someone saying, you know, I don't want a home, want a council flat that meets my needs, I mean, that is actually not a position you hear very often, for example, these days, you know. And just that, you know, the different needs, you know, someone wants a house with a garden, someone wants to live with people, someone wants to live in a collective, you know, and all those different forms of housing can be part of our vision for public housing, you know. And I guess often housing movements, you know, are kind of critiqued as like the only thing that we're demanding is, you know, what was there in the 60s or the 80s, for example, you know. And the kind of standard narrative is that was obviously a disaster. So, you know, we need, you know, mixed communities or a mix of homeowners, you know. And this is actually just showing that, yeah, just a kind of different vision of what public housing could be. And just, yeah, that, yeah, so for me, that is quite radical, and just that quite, you know, quite subtly it links housing and, you know, to kind of struggles right across the working class. You know, it's not just houses we need, you know, we need community. It links it, you know, to other, you know, struggles that are happening in the workplace, and the little photographs at the end. And then obviously, yeah, all the kind of different sections in class, you know, in terms of racism as well that people are facing. So yeah, I think that's, yeah, someone's put there this multiplicity of needs. You know, there's something like dispossession, for example, that Paul Sink, you know, it's quite a kind of, there's one narrative to explain what has happened to social housing, you know, kind of quite standard social democratic explanation, but there's, you know, there's other ways of looking at what's happened as well. I think that film, yeah, kind of gives voice to that is in a way maybe a bit rarer these days.
Yeah, Tamima, can you hear me now? Is that, can you, is that working?
Yes, I can hear you.
I just wondered what your response to, I was wondering if I'd sent that link to you before as well, or what your response to the first film was, the Leeds Animation Workshop, in terms of, yeah, like showing difference and I guess how it, and how, yeah, like what you got from watching that film, maybe that you didn't get from watching the second film as well. I'm interested in that comparison a bit as well.
The first one, the animation was really interesting in terms of, you know, there were different people talking in different, you know, backgrounds. And the one thing that really caught my attention was when one woman was saying that, you know, you could be living in a house, but then at the same time, you could be homeless. So that just really clicked in my mind. And I thought, yeah, because so many people are going through that. Like, I have few friends who at the moment, yeah, they have a roof over their heads, but they're homeless.
Yeah, I think that understanding of language is so important, like what it means to be, what the word homeless means for just different people.
Absolutely, because some people feel like when you got a roof over you, then you're not homeless. At least you have somewhere to go in and sleep or just put your things. But then when you know, when I was watching the animation, I thought, yeah, that could be true because yeah, so many people I know they're at the same position at this very time. So just like the way Joy was saying that, you know, social housing is just been a problem for a while, and people need to, you know, come together and come up with an agenda and to know what we can do or how we can strategize everything and see how we can make the council or the homeowners or anyone who is involved to get to the attention and know that, you know, this is a problem that is it's going on.
I just wondered about that. Yeah, like there's a moment in that where a word that came up that we need to be consulted, and that was kind of one of the words that came up yesterday in the We're Still Here with at the end of We're Still Here with that idea of that, I think it's called the space in Nottingham, in the space, and the idea of like returning decision-making power to the people who live in these places seems so obvious in so many ways of understanding how this system can change. Like, and also that's a way of understanding difference, but that's so rarely the case that those kind of consultations really mean what they say they mean. I guess it's to find a different word for consultation, which is more meaningful as well.
But I like as well though that, you know, just that, you know, it's a film that's full of colour, you know, the music's quite funky. There's a lot going on in the animation. It also just disrupts a little bit, you know, so often, yeah, kind of forced as well to just always have the same aesthetic, or like house and stuff, or just shots of this concrete building.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of my...
It's miserable, you know, that as well as like that's, you know, I think in that sense quite radical as well, because it's just, like just a different kind of framing of it. And, you know, there is colour, there is this diversity, there is, you know, not just kind of trapped in this like miserablest cycle or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I love the
that's our
scene.
only bracket, you know, that just like
I love that scene with the bubbles and the kind of utopian images of their different images of what they would like their house to be like, and like hearing an older voiced woman talk about how if she'd had a house of her own she wouldn't have got married. Like, I just found that completely incredible and sort of just never really hear that position, you know, articulated. This was made in 1986. I guess I'm just interested in that. I guess the kind of the longevity of these situations and the continuity of those feels really prescient. And I guess one of the reasons why I use archive films to begin these projects is to ask, like, yeah, what has changed and what has stayed the same? And when I show this to the group I'm working with, they say it just could be made yesterday. There's so little in it that feels...
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it just feels like yesterday, and especially the second video, and it's just like the other day, 1975. You just feel like it's not that long time ago. I know it feels long time, but yeah, the problems are still the same, and people are facing the same issues time and time again. Whereby now, if you go and, you know, apply for housing, for social housing, and some private tenants don't want to, you know, rent anyone properties because if you are on benefits or stuff like that, they don't want that. So that creates a huge problem, and the rent keeps on hiking and going up and up each and every time. So I don't know if it's the thing is that I'm seeing more homes being built, but the problem is still there. So I'm just trying to figure out in my head, like, what's going on. And yeah, it's something that is not sitting well with me at the moment, because the houses are there. I see how homes being built every time, but people are still struggling. And the councils are saying that they don't have enough homes.
And I guess
So-
that's what in the film yesterday, and we talked about that. You talked about it yesterday a bit. Like there's not enough houses. There's just not enough houses. There's not enough social housing, and that's, I guess, a huge problem. I guess one of the things I wanted to think about today was, like I say, like thinking, like, I guess the question is like, yeah, if these films were made today, or these videos are made today, like what would they be about? How would they be useful? What would be a useful video now? Like now, what would it be? What would it show? And whose stories would it tell? And who would make it? Like, I wonder if you've had time to think about that, or responding to that question in some way. Either of you, like, because you both work in different ways with housing activism, and the housing struggles. Like, what would be? Yeah, what do you wish? I guess what do you wish existed in terms of a video that might be useful now that doesn't exist, or maybe does already exist? Like, what are the things that the tools that you would like at hand, that how video could be helpful? Is it to document actions? Is it to film meetings so other people can see them? Is it to do something more like damp tapes? Or how is it to, because one of the things I've been thinking a lot about with this group I'm working with is around demystifying the language. And you guys talked about that yesterday, about language. And I made a film 2 years ago about community land trusts, trying to like demystify the language around land ownership and land trusts. And the whole video was kind of like try to like demystify a lot of that language around land ownership in cities. I just wondered like when I set that homework, if you like, I wonder if either of you had any sense of what you thought that video might look like.
I would definitely want it to look like, to be involved with people who are, struggling and going through that, because it will be just close to home. And I would even want it to be for everyone, so that, because some people don't have the knowledge of knowing that there are people who are struggling with housing. So that perspective, it's not really there with some people, and it's there with the people who are going through that. So for me, I would feel like it should involve people who are really going through the housing issues. What do you think, Joy?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this, and I couldn't really come up with an answer. And I think I realised it was that there's not just kind of one film that we could make, and really we need a lot. And even just this morning, I was having a look through. I just housing films about London, so even like just quickly this morning, I seen there was like a film about like gentrification East London in the style of like a spaghetti western. There was like a kind of documentary with different kind of community voices about like canal side gentrification in London. One about like exposing, the language. And, we watched yesterday, Melissa Herman's We're Still Here, following different. So I don't know, there's a lot of films, about what's happening in London, from like community video, there's like experimental videos that are pushing it. So I think like in Glasgow, there's been a little bits like Chris Leslie's like Disappearing Glasgow project, is included, films. So like he filmed, with Margaret Giaconelli and then Dalmarnock, Hard Eviction during the Commonwealth Games, the Birdman of Red Road. There's a little bit there, but I think, we're missing a lot. So I think that's it. Like I would make a lot of films. So things.
But but then how would you use those films? I think because I guess it's thinking about how those films could be useful to a group like Living Rent Glasgow. Like, what purpose would they serve? Because I've seen. I know that maybe you could tell us, but I know that you've used video to film actions and put them on like Facebook and share that. And I think that's about documenting an action, right? That's kind of what the video is used for. And it's like, I guess what would be called like bearing witness, right? Like it's like the camera as evidence as well. But I wonder if like, I know you've shown films as part of your meetings, but one of the things I have to think about when you show films that aren't from like what Tamima was saying, like not from your context specifically, there's something other about that experience. So I guess it's finding ways to make a film screening feel less other and more like us and more like from, I suppose, is what I'm trying to think about. Like what would they look like, or what would happen in those?
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that totally. I mean, I think Molly's here, so like did some workshops for young people in Townhead, for example, at the top of Glasgow City Centre, where, you know, it's a working class community that has literally been like hemmed in on all sides, like by kind of university expansion, by student accommodation, and the young people there have been kind of using photo voice to document that situation. So, like for example, like putting video as a tool to kind of document that, to expose what is happening, to attack, you know, the language at kind of district regeneration frameworks. You know, but like with the young people in Townhead, we showed This Is Parkdale. So it's like a 2015 film about tenants in, I think it's in Montreal, organising a rent strike in their block. And, you know, it's really like fast paced, it's cut, you know, it's got like good hip hop music in it. And it's, you know, it's an amazing film. And we watched it in the class, and by the end of it, it's like, right, kind of well psyched, like wanting to like organise a showing of it in Townhead, because you're showing like the struggle that, you know, people like you in different cities are doing.
So you see it.
And I think like still in Glasgow, like we're at quite a low level of struggle. You know, we couldn't make a film like that in Glasgow just now because those sorts of struggles aren't taking place, you know, at the moment. So I think, you know, so I would, I think. So
you see, almost you're saying there's something is useful about seeing a video from elsewhere, because it says like this happened and this is happening elsewhere too. So there's like, it's a way of like evidencing solidarity or something. It's like saying, I see myself in other people, and that's important, and that makes me feel more seen and more recognized.
Yeah, and just like that film is like, it's exciting. By the end of it, you feel like, you know, you're ready to go. You feel angry, you feel psyched up. So I think it's really good for that, because I think, you know, I think we just need different films to do different things.
Right, because in the meetings, Tamima and I and Chris and Tyler and Michelle have been organising monthly. They're kind of organised around different themes. So like we kind of tried to think about the different moments that an activist group might go through. And if you're in the room, try to remind me of them. But I think the first meeting was about recruitment and involvement. The second meeting was about how to run a meeting. The third meeting is going to be about organizing structures and organizing around actions. And then the fourth meeting is around actions. And the fifth meeting is around sustainability and care. And then the sixth meeting is like a reflection. And so one of the ideas I've been thinking about in the background since we've been having these is like, maybe it needs to be like 6 videos that cover these different areas. So then like, there's like a sense that you could watch them in isolation, like one, or you could watch just one or any of those, or you could watch them all together to get a sense of these different things. But the fact that you're seeing how to organize a meeting happening in Glasgow, but also from a group in London, or how to go door knocking in different cities. Like, I don't know, when I interviewed someone from Living Rent in London, no, not Living Rent, London Renters Union in London, just hearing their really like specific detailed breakdown of how they do door knocking, for example, like how they got to the point of door knocking, like I found really fascinating as a tool. And then similarly, like hearing how different groups organize in Nottingham and Birmingham at different things felt really useful. So just thinking about maybe this, like you're saying, like there needs to be multiple videos that like serve different purposes. That's just one. I've been having similar thoughts, I guess, around multiplicity being really important, to hold all those different moments and there's different ways of interacting with, I guess, housing struggles. But then I guess there's also the underlying thing, right, which is 2 things which we haven't talked about, which I was going to bring up at our next meeting, are like how to also explain like why things are the way they are, but not make that be the center of it, because that education is really important. But what was the second thing I was thinking about? oh my god, my mind's gone blank. Why things are the way they are, and no, it's gone. My mind's blank. I'll stop. So yeah, that's what we've been thinking about recently, I guess, in our meetings. Like, I'll try and think of the other thing I was thinking about.
So, I mean, for example, now, at the moment, there's a 11 Rent branch in Wynford up in Maryhill are occupying a piece of land which the council has been trying to sell off for private housing development. It's the site of former council housing scheme, where they filmed still games. So there was like a little 5-minute video that they made the other day, that was pretty good, like just little shots of like the hut that's on the occupied site and just interviews with different members of the community talking about the process of kind of social cleansing and public housing sell-off, which, is really common in London, but a lot, is not really there in Glasgow yet as a kind of likely thing. So, I mean, something like that, you could make a video about what has happened to the valley, how the Wynford Tenants Union, is organised, what was the background of that organising, for example, like in the 90s and 2000s, how they've gone about this occupation, what are the demands of the community, but I think, that's part of it. And I think, video is important, but, you don't learn to organise a meeting or to do door knocking, by watching a video. That can be part of it.
That's how I understand.
But we're doing, so for example, like we've got training programs, like just now 11 Rent, a big thing, like how do you do an agenda? How do you take minutes? And the video is part of that, but it's also about like the wider political culture, which, for example, here, has been kind of decimated over the last 20, 30 years. Because, our tenants organisations, kind of trade unions, this has all been, severely attacked alongside, this kind of mass demolitions and redevelopments that have taken place. So yeah, I think like,
I think part of one of the things that motivated this, I guess, from what I was thinking about when you're saying is like, there's a problem, right? Like housing struggles are really localized. Like when I first started volunteering at a group, I was like, oh, we should just make a video of like how to bid on a house, for example, right? Or like how to understand the bidding process when you're on the housing list. And then realizing within like 10 minutes that like every borough has a different bidding system, let alone every city, like every council. So thinking about like what is possible to translate outside of the local and what is very locally specific is also something I've been trying to think about. Like how does a video travel and still be useful when like housing policy is so specific and so complicated to understand even within your own borough, to then scale that out. Because I'm working with this group in London, like thinking about kind of a bit of like an A to Z, like what do all these words mean? How do you calculate overcrowding, for example? What does temporary housing really mean? Like the idea of demystifying that language is really useful for the people who are trying to engage with that system. But does that language translate? Is overcrowding calculated the same in every borough? Definitely not. Like it's different. So like I've been trying to think about how, I wonder if you guys have got any thoughts on like, well, I guess kind of what you're saying, Joe, like that video made in Montreal was still useful to see in Scotland. Like it wasn't not useful, but how could something within the UK be useful, even if it's quite specific and detail oriented, I guess? And like you're saying, like door knocking is something you learn about from doing it and from talking about it. But there is something maybe demystifying about seeing, oh, that's kind of basically what door knocking is. I didn't even like, would that still be useful, for example? Would that not be useful? Or like, yeah, like here's how we organize a meeting. Is that useful, or is it better just to do that? Like I just wonder how those things can't do or don't translate outside of their local context.
I think it's useful what you said, Ed, because I feel like videos and filmmaking and all that, it's so important, especially for people who, language is it's a huge thing for them. So it's kind of like it communicates with them so clearly and they understand. Because like right now at the moment with the women I'm working with, they were actually living like in the flats, and then all of a sudden they came and been moved, and now there's Mia's have been having these properties whereby it was a rundown, and then they tried and renovate it, and it's a studio like, but then it's not enough for a mom. It's called Moms and Kids, but then it's not enough for the moms, because we had a meeting and we went to visit the women, and it was just horrendous. And yeah, and everyone was just confused, and they didn't know where to go, who to ask for help and everything.
Mm.
So yeah, so I feel like
So
video,
if you had a video that would explain some
Yeah.
of those things, that'd be useful, you think?
that's it, yeah.
Because I guess then you could also have it in different languages, and maybe that's also, there's something about language that often gets lost in those moments as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I just realized I didn't get you guys to explain what you do, what Living Rent and WASH do. So maybe Tamima, you could explain a bit more about how WASH function, like how you function in relationship to what do you do? How does WASH work?
Yeah, so WASH is a women asylum seeker housing project, whereby we work directly with women who are going through migration process. So what MIAS is the immediate accommodation provider, which works with the Home Office. So they provide the accommodations, and then as WASH organization, we help the service users with their problems in terms of all the repairs. Are they done on time? Are they given good properties, well looked after, stuff like that? So they come to us, and we try and give MIAS a little push if they're not doing their job, and then if they're not working the way we want, so we have to inform the Home Office, and they can be heavily fined. So so we are like the middle players in there.
And how many, is it a mixture of volunteer and paid staff? Like, how does it run? Like, what's the kind of organizational structure? I know we're going to have a meeting about this next week, but I'm just wondered what the organizational structure was of WASH.
Yeah, so there's paid staff, and that's from the director to volunteers, coordinators, and then we have like about 10-15 volunteers who are working, and we've got WASH and ASH. So ASH is for men and WASH is for women, because of religion, which involves like they don't want to work with men and all that stuff. So we decided to split it up in two. So we meet every Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Tuesdays is for women and Thursdays is for men.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. And how long has it been running for?
It's been running now it started around 2008.
Right.
Yeah, so it's been there for a while, but it wasn't that really known until we started, organizing and doing other stuff in terms of before MIAS got the contract, we used to have oh my God, SACCO.
Oh,
So
right, okay.
SACCO wasn't doing well, so we had to, plead with our case, and the contract was taken away from them, and then now it's MIAS, which they're okay, but it's still
tricky. Yeah, I mean, I think the negotiation is a really tough one, right? Have you ever used any kind of film or video, like informational videos or other videos with your groups?
Yes, we have, but majority of people didn't want to be recognized, so it's like a voice, not animated, but just voice. People talking about their experience and what they've been through and how they managed to get the other side. Yeah, we have that. Right.
Yeah, because the reason why I'm working with animation with the group I'm working with is also around anonymity as well, and thinking about how to. I guess one of the themes of a lot of the work that I think about is how to represent invisibility in like a way that's still respectful, and so people don't just drop out just because they don't want to be seen. Finding ways to still represent them feels really important. And Jerry, do you want to do an introduction, a delayed introduction to what Living Rent? I guess Living Rent, how it functions and how it's organised as well.
Yeah, so just briefly, so it's a Scotland-wide tenants union, mass membership based organisation for tenants across all tenures, so in kind of private housing, private rented sector, social housing, and in council housing. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of getting more complex each year, but I mean, I guess the base of the union is local branches formed by tenants in each area. So like in Glasgow, like I'm in Pollock Shields, got branches in Govan Hill and Partick, in Maryhill, Govan, and
you've used film. You've used film in for your meetings quite a lot, right?
Yeah, so in different contexts. So like, I mean, like our AGMs, for example, like we screened Not a Penny on the Rents, so that's cinema action film from the late 60s, a really amazing film documenting the struggles of Greater London Council tenants against slum conditions and also rent rises. And like that film was quite influential in us like, organising campaigns around yearly rent increases in housing associations in Scotland, you know, and that film was really useful because it showed, yeah, I mean, some, you know, housing associations here, you know, still seem as a kind of good thing, you know, it's better than a private rented sector, but actually, yeah, that we shouldn't just accept, you know, constant rent increases in any sector. Yeah, so I mean, that was one example where you can use this archive film was like directly essential to our organising. We use that same slogan, like Not a Penny on the Rents, is something that we've used in organising, for instance. And then, yeah, I guess in different historical contexts, like people have been putting the films there in the chat, like Clyde film and the Frustration Game from Drumchapel, and Don Cine film about the Mary Lee campaign in 1950s against the sell-off of council housing. And I guess, yeah, this kind of housing history is so hidden in Glasgow as well. That's something that we've used.
Have you made many videos? You said did you make videos around how to do agendas and meetings, or are you that? Or
no, so I mean that's videos not been part of those things, for example. But I mean there has been like films through the pandemic. Like one of the big campaigns we've led is for housing associations and GHA in particular to maintain like, adequate cleaning of common areas in tower blocks and social housing. And
what was the video you made for that then?
Well, it wasn't like a video that Live and Rent made, but just you were mentioning these damp videos, like people were just like filming. For example, and the stairs. You know, we've had like little, you know, just like phone videos of different actions, you know, to launch the Tenants Manifesto. But yeah, it's kind of just like yeah. You know, that's just something as well we need to build in terms of like expertise, material, you know, equipment to kind of make films and decide what we want. So yeah, I mean, the one that was posted 2 days ago about the occupation that's happening in the valley in Maryhill, you know, that was like a bit longer. I think it was just done in a few days, but that was more like trying to tell the story, what's happening in the valley, hearing from different people in the community about the effects of the regeneration in the area, and yeah, kind of calling people to get involved. But yeah, it's not like, yeah, it's not been like a major part so far. But again, I think that's just about, you know, experience.
Yeah. I guess that's what. I guess this is kind of leads me to like maybe a question about like it was one of the things that kind of ended the session yesterday a bit. It's like the fear that videos like of this nature are preaching to the converted and how to get them out to more people. On the one hand, right, like to increase education and to increase, I guess, the idea of consciousness raising, right, which is kind of what your session ended on yesterday. It's like if everyone knew what capitalism was, for example, that'd be that was one of the aims, right? And so just thinking about, yeah, like these two positions, right? How do you make something that, like Tamima was saying, yeah, it should be appeal to everyone, which is complicated because there isn't really an everyone. There's only like specific experiences, but at the same time being quite specific and focused and being useful to people who are impacted more directly. And whether we should spend time appealing to everyone or whether we should spend time making videos that are specific to the needs of the people and the groups that we're working with. It's kind of a question. Do you know what I mean? I guess there's two, maybe they're not in conflict with one another, but understanding these different audiences feels really important to like a project like a future video project is. For like I was saying, like for me, I never press record till I know who the audience is in some sense, and I just wondered whether the idea of appealing to an everyone might then be to the detriment of like a very specific, useful video about something quite focused. What's your response to those two kind of positions, I suppose?
Tamima, do you want to go?
Okay. Yeah, to that question, actually, yeah, I don't know what to, yeah, I would feel like just, yeah, you made a good point. Like, yeah, not everyone should see these videos, but then again, I'm thinking like, does everyone know, and then they just don't pay attention to them? So I'm in between there. For me, I feel like, yeah, it should be, yeah, for everyone, not majority, like people who, they don't understand the housing problems or all that stuff. But for people who yeah, and the people who we meet and organizations that we work for. But yeah, because it's just, yeah, it's just too heavy for me sometimes, and I feel like um the housing problem, especially with the people I work with, is just major, and kind of frustrating, I would use that word. But then at the same time, yeah, I think video should be key. Yeah, we should make more of it, so that, yeah, especially with people with language barriers, I feel like yeah, they'll understand it more than, just calling for meetings. And these are things that they totally don't understand or get, or come to terms with because of the language. But when there's like a film, yeah, everyone is more intrigued and excited to see them, so they kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with moving image. I often think there is something instantly appealing about that experience of like, I know it sounds really like basic, but like, yeah, like watching something is very like there's something, and that's why I think I've always been drawn to it as a medium, because of that it feels very democratic in terms of accessibility, like, and it is exciting and interesting to watch something in a way that maybe isn't so accessible if it's written down, or maybe if it's in a meeting you can't go to, for example, or like a place you can't get to. So just thinking about the accessibility of video does feel really important. And I think, I really like videos that can speak on different languages. Like I've seen some films that sometimes things are subtitled and sometimes they aren't, depending. So the language is only for people who understand that language, and other times it's more accessible. So if the video can hold these different kind of registers. But I guess I like the damp tapes I referred to, made in the 70s. I really like watching them, not for entertainment, but to think about the processes they were using and why they were using them, and also to think about what has changed and what hasn't changed. I still think that those videos really function in that way. And I think there's something in a video where you can instantly then say after you've seen it, like, if I'm not seeing this, why wasn't I seeing this, and who was it for? And it creates a kind of point of reference and a point of kind of discussion, whether you agree with what you're seeing or whether you don't agree with it in some ways. I think that's kind of useful in and of itself. Yeah, what about you, Joey?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, I think we need, like, for me, I think we need films in Glasgow that just show how messed up what is going on here, and actually start to really represent like the violence that's been done to the city that communities have gone through, that there doesn't exist a lot about. So I don't know, like even just this morning, like I was reading, just been in town. So I mean, this thing with the hotels, for example, in Glasgow, like there's obviously been a total horror of people in the asylum system, being moved to out of accommodation into hotels, like through the pandemic that has led. I mean, just the amount of death and suffering that has caused. Also homeless hostels in the city centre. Like it's just carnage. And at the same time, we've got like massive, I think there's 7 massive new hotel developments taking place in Glasgow city centre. So, something like that, you kind of just walk, it's not commented on, like it just happens and you just walk through the city and this just happens. So like, for me, it's just something about that, for example. Or, I read another article this morning that popped up in Glasgow Live, that there's plans for a massive new development on the Clyde between the Squinty Bridge and the Kingston Bridge, like this big bit of vacant land. And yeah, this huge investment company has got plans for like a vibrant mixed community there, 400 private bought homes and 300 homes to rent. Now, and they're going to do a consultation with the community next week. So, things like that. I don't know, I feel like in London, for example, like there's been films about that and what that really means. All different kinds of aspects. Ways, like straight explanation, you know, experimental ones showing like the horror of this thing, community films. Whereas in Glasgow, these things are just happening. You know, with very little comment, not within a framework where people can go, you know, about, okay, what has happened with vacant land? What does, you know, gentrification mean, redevelopment? So I think we need films that are like, you know, in a way challenging like the easy assumptions also of the audience that, you know, might agree with things. So I think it's not about just more films about housing problems. It's like people don't need to necessarily see a film about how their houses are damp because they're living in them. You know, we need films as like, why is that? Who's responsible? How
about more structural things
in the past? You know, so I don't know. I think it's like we need to kind of think of a way to kind of, yeah, push things like formally and also like in terms of, you know, audience, you know, just like knowing something doesn't like help you do anything about it.
No.
Like, you know, so I think like within a context, you know, we're trying to build power, we're building bases, we're building branches, we're organizing, you know, that's your kind of audience. And I don't think it's always necessarily about more information because like, you know, you can go into The Guardian any day of the week and read a million things about like individual stories of austerity, but it doesn't, you know, it's not really part of a political project to see.
Yeah, maybe it's removing that middle bit. So it's like saying these are the structures that are problematic, right? Like developers, housing, the problems with housing association, private rents, like these are the structures, leaving out the impact of that because the people that know already, and then just going straight to like, here's not the solutions, but here's how to organize different ways of organizing around against or like in opposition to these structures. But maybe it's not, like you say, it's not showing like how necessarily I don't know. I'm just trying to think. I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, it can be that, but yeah, I think it's like that. It can't separate like.
No, but not separating.
The film alone is not going to do that. It's like what we need to do is to continue to build and organize politically. You know, so I don't think a film necessarily needs to show like, okay, then here are the answers, because you know, in a way there aren't answers yet. You know, that is a constant process. So I don't think also it needs to like necessarily be like, and then this is ABC how you do it, because like that is part of a much deeper and wider collective process that is going to be different in every context. So Tamima was talking about, you know, they're organizing with WASH and the specific problems, and like there, you know, and like what is happening in Pollock Shaws is different than what's happening in Sighthill. It's different from what's happening in Govan Hill, you know, and we need like a kind of total approach to it, you know. So I think like the film like alone, it can just do like different things. But
I guess like what you're saying is really important, right? Like the film alone is not the thing, but it can only ideally it could be a catalyst, right? Or it can be a tool that can support that action, but it's not in place of the action, right? Like I think that's what you said about door knocking. Like it can't be a replacement for the real thing, but it could be a bridge, I guess, a bridging device towards those actions and that education.
Yeah, but I think a representation though is important, you know, because, you know, the fact that there isn't a lot or any films in Glasgow, for example, about gentrification or about regeneration, or like about the demolitions and the transformational regeneration areas, or the district regeneration framework in Glasgow city centre and what that has meant, or how university expansion, you know, is leading to more. There's no films about this stuff, or like I think I've seen Kirsten Payton was in the film, you know, so she's done a lot of work about what's happened in Partick, you know, the effects of these developments, you know, so like a film also, you know, about that would be, you know, useful. Or I just think, you know, 11 Rent, what we've done the last few years, we've not really made a lot of films about that, and it gets lost. So I just think it's like we need to, I think film can be really important, you know, because it's another way of distributing like a framework to understand these things from the narrative that we were left with from the media and from Glasgow City Council, which is, you know, largely unchallenged, and also because the left socialist movement has not really taken housing seriously the past, you know, 3-4 decades. You know, it's not like there's some kind of like alternative kind of structure to understand
No.
things. And then again, like the destruction of our communities physically also means it's difficult to do this, because it's like your bases are constantly being, you know, destroyed by the actual process of redevelopment. Sorry, I just kind of in there. But it's an interesting question.
Have a great weekend. I hear what you're saying. I guess that what again you're pointing to, which is kind of where we began as well, is just like how to represent a multiplicity of positions and situations in a single thing. There's an impossibility to that in a way. So it's like how to hold, like whether it's, it's like you've both been saying, it's many videos that do many different things. And I think from that you can draw out the one of the underlying problems that there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to like the housing crisis, because it comes from so many different places, from race to class to economics to gentrification. And I guess what that, in a way, I think I haven't been able to follow the chat because I've had lots of other things. I've been doing this, but one of the things that came up earlier, I think, was talking about having something like the Leeds Animation Workshop film, which kind of explains the positions and the structures, the positions of these individuals, but and the structures that kind of got them there, whether that's familial or financial. And then the second film, Forming a Residents Association, does like some of the work of like, imagine if those 5 people then went to a meeting like this and they were able to like engage and negotiate their own housing position in different ways. And I think in the space that which was where the film ended yesterday, thinking about like what consultation really could look like and what power could look like if it was put into the hands of the people that live in the houses that they live in, feels really important. I guess I wanted to see if there were, there's one question here, what about issues around distribution? I guess that comes back to thinking about, for me, about audience, right? Like it depends who your audience is. And for me, I tend to organize screenings at the same time as I'm making something. So for me, for this project, for example, there would be like, I did a video in 2018 that I toured around the UK. And so thinking about how this kind of video would be toured and shared would be around the activist groups that are involved in making it, I guess, which just feels in terms of like a direct audience, and then that would grow. And I think audience and distribution feel really key to me. And I think technologically we are able to think much more creatively about distribution. And I think something that's come out of the pandemic is around accessibility for me, and how all screenings can potentially happen online as well as in person and involve different, I guess the idea of hybridity feels more important to me as well, since I've learned more about that from doing it, like from the pandemic, I guess. Does anyone have any questions in the room? This was quite I knew it was going to be kind of a sprawling conversation, but I'm really grateful to you all for like sticking it out. I think for me, I guess this was kind of, like I said at the beginning, a bit of like an open door into the research I'm doing rather than anything that neat. So I hope you've all been okay with that. Because it's a really difficult conversation to have, and it is about something very real to so many people. So just thinking sensitively about that really, and where the use is in these projects. And I think, I guess from my experience of making videos with groups, like the act of making a video is really exciting and enjoyable and entertaining, and offers a form of escape, but also a form of representation, another way of talking about your situation, another form of articulation, even for the people just involved in the production. And then so that feels, sometimes it's just enough for the project, and other times there's a desire for it to do more, whether that's change policy or whether that's to change opinions. Like, I guess it's having a sense of what the intention is for this video project at the beginning, which might not be about policy, much more about education and consciousness raising, rather than like, this is going to be shown to like architects and councillors and housing associations. But maybe, who knows, I don't know. It's still early days, but those are some of the audiences I've been thinking about. Does anyone have any questions they want to add? They can turn their microphone and ask them.
Ed, can I ask you a question, Ed?
Yes, please.
I'm kind of, starting from a sort of stylistic question.
Wait, hang on, I can't hear you. Someone else has just turned their microphone on. I can hear like some sort of football match. Can anyone else hear that?
No.
Can anyone else hear that noise? No, just me. You sure?
Yeah.
I'm going to see if I've got a weird... Oh, the video just started playing again on Vimeo, but that was so confusing. Sorry, I'm back. Sure, you can tell us my first one. Okay.
Starting as a sort of stylistic question about the difference between animation and the documentary of the two films that you were presenting, but then I guess then coming through to the thing about it being anonymized in the Home and Dry film, whereas in the Forming a Residents Association, you're very aware of the characters and the people involved. And I wondered from all three of your perspective, what that meant in terms of, I mean, I think you've sort of answered it in terms of saying there should be lots of different films doing lots of different things, but what that meant to you, the difference between those two styles of filmmaking.
So like the kind of candidness of the second one and the kind of more
well, although possibly the Home and Dry was more candid because they were anonymized.
Right, okay.
Because that was actually much more personal. We got a lot more out of them. I think maybe in the second one we were more able to make assumptions about those people because we could see them and hear them. You know, it was a very different kind of portrayal of characters, I guess. And issues, most importantly.
What do you guys think, formally? Because we touched on a bit on anonymity already, I guess, with Tamima. I guess wonder what is gained or lost by those two different forms, do you think, Tamima?
I would I kind of me too, I like the second one, as the way Kitty is saying, because we could see them, we could hear them talking, but at the same time, even with the animation was good as well, in terms of, you know, you could understand the whole perspective of the situations that these people were going through. But then, yeah, it was just, I would feel like both of them should, if we were to make film, I think both of them should be done.
Formed.
Yeah.
What about you, Joey?
Well, I think, I mean, that's the third time I've watched the Residents Association one.
Sorry.
Well, no, but I mean, Kitty, you were saying assumptions about, I mean, I just find them incredibly annoying, the people in it. You know, it's this kind of weird upper class yuppie layer, you know, quite self-consciously political, making this film, you know, it's weird stuff. It's like, oh, they've moved the old people out, we've come in, we're a young mobile community, we're not going to get council house. And, you know, I was a bit like, I don't know what role these people are playing within that context in Camden at the time. You know, so like, for example, that film, like, if you're like, that film probably useful if you're going to show that to other layers of people organizing like that, you know, the traditional kind of activist layer or whatever. You know, if you were to show that in a different context, people are just going like, who the hell are these? You know, I find it completely off-putting. You know, so I think, like, but kind of abstract from that, then, it can be useful, you know, and you really see like kind of basic, like, level, you know, people just trying to figure out these questions, how they organize, you know. But if you see people like you, potentially, you know, I wouldn't show that, like, I'm just thinking in what context I would show that second film today. I don't know where I would show it, whereas the Leeds one, you know, I would definitely, you know, screen that.
That's really good to hear. I think there's something in that about representation, right? And I think because of that group, they did a lot of work to house women fleeing domestic violence and children, I think, in that same street, who aren't in the room, which I think is kind of telling in and of itself. And I've done quite a lot. I've been thinking a lot about their position and what they, I guess, how they read as a group. They were all like white middle class people who moved into London and were used to like a certain way of life, and I guess a certain type of bohemia as well, or what that bohemia would look like and feel like, and the work they were doing. And then because Sue ended up, she kind of dipped her toe into community video. She made one with a lot of elderly residents of that neighborhood looking back at what's changed, and then she found it such a difficult experience, she stopped doing that, and they just formed more like a kind of video production house, like a radical video production house. And they did a lot of good work in terms of they filmed a lot of their actions, and they did a lot of occupations that weren't just for them, but it's because of the one, there's a second compilation which I have access to, which isn't on the LCVA, which is them filming a series of actions they did where they went into, like, I think council offices and the developers' offices and like just occupied them and asked questions. And it's really, I guess aesthetically, I think it's so similar to like the that Focus E15 video of going into going into the bank. Was that Focus E15? I'm confused of so many different groups.
No, that was the London Renters Union.
Yeah, going into about the mortgages. Just like the idea of like filming confrontations, and with the group I volunteer with, a little bit of hassle in South London, Housing Action Southern Lambeth, like filming their films they've done of like going into the council offices to get to demand certain things. And I guess that I think aesthetically it's just I think it's fascinating to me how 40 odd years has passed, but their videos are almost identical, and they could have been filmed at the same time in terms of just the way that they use the camera to document the action. So I kind of find that fascinating. But yeah, I like hearing what you're saying about like how relevant that forming a residents association could be today. And maybe if that was made animated without the disruption of their presence, of their specific presence, it could still be maybe more useful, because it feels like a bygone time in a way, right? What they're representing.
I think, like Tamima was saying before, like watching those videos, that in a way like they could be made again today in terms of like the questions that are there. But I think like the thing is though, like, compared to 60s or 70s and 80s, you read this stuff, there was loads. It was like I was reading some stuff about like Brixton. There was like the Brixton television workshops. It was like a Leeds Animation Workshop. Someone shared Clyde's film with Cranhill Arts. There was different fun. There's not like, it seemed like there was quite a lot of kind of like radical video groups, workshop groups, funding structures. Like that film, Clyde film, or like Easter House People in Power, films made in the 80s, is still different as well in terms of the consciousness that existed, elements of the socialist movement that was still, still survived in a way, kind of more autonomous, kind of working class political culture, that like, we're not in the same, like these films couldn't be made today because like, the social and political conditions are much different, and we're in an even weaker position now than we were in the 1980s. In a way, a lot of that space has also been kind of professionalized and captured through like official community arts, or
and charity groups.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So, like with the house and, we live in Rent, we're coming from a very low, it's different in London. It's not like there's been this big spontaneous upsurge of housing struggles. Has not happened at all. It's not like in Brixton, or in any of the places like in the Haygate, there was big campaigns here, to defend Sight Hill or whatever, or blocks came down in Pollock Shaws. So like, we're in a situation here where those, like the funding, the money, the political experience, the consciousness, like, the connection maybe between like politics and arts and community, like, it's all a much weaker level than it was in the 80s, and these things are not being screened on TV. We don't have access to like these networks of distribution or production. So it's like, that's like, we're right at the start in a way, and in a way we're further behind than compared to 70s or 80s. So it's like, it's just going to start, it's like, maybe, I hope we make these films in 5 years, I hope like confrontation, a struggle organization is going to keep increasing, and then we're going to be able to make better films in a way, so so that I don't, there's a whole range of things that are different, and in a way have been retrenched now in 2021 compared to
sure. I guess understanding, these videos also help to understand what's changed and what stayed the same, I think, right? So like on the one hand you can say these things are really similar, but you can also like pick apart the fact that the GLC existed, which co-funded that Leeds Animation Workshop film, which doesn't exist anymore. So structures are different, distribution is different, technology is different, those things, there are those differences that will impact on the way in which, I guess, video can be produced and made and seen. There's a question from Molly.
Hi, yeah, sorry, my Wi-Fi's playing up, so I can't, I'm just a voice.
That's
behind
okay. I trust you.
I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but I think I'm just kind of thinking on the role of film to imagine the possible and to understand, because you talked about having an answer before, and I don't think you necessarily need the answer, but there's definitely a role for what the possible is. And I wanted to use a kind of strange example. I watched Schitt's Creek recently, which is on Netflix. It's light entertainment. It's kind of really easy watching, and it's got a humongous audience globally. And it's been an absolute watershed in the kind of gay rights movement and gay rights filming, because what they do in Schitt's Creek is there's a gay couple who are in the kind of core of the story, and nobody mentions it. It's never talked about. So they just imagine a world where that is just the norm. And they kind of, and the gay rights, there's been loads of films about the struggle of, you know, getting human rights and recommendations and legality and all of that around, and the gay community have kind of come out and said, nobody's ever just done this. What's the world like when we're not having to struggle? What does that world look like? And it suddenly, and while they're displaying what the world looks like without this issue, they are making you laugh. And it's just got globally this humongous audience. And I just wonder what the kind of translation of that sort of thinking into the housing films. There's a glut of kind of entertaining housing films, you know, like, to be fair, some of them can be quite, you know, there's a lot of focus on education and less focus on entertainment. And I just wonder what role entertainment has in
I've been thinking about that a lot. I guess the idea, the kind of irony of the word speculation, which is a word used by property developers, but because the group I'm working with in London, I'm having this discussion now with them about speculation in terms of imagining possible futures. So there's something really potentially powerful and political about using film to imagine possible futures, right? On the one hand, and we're doing this exercise at the moment where we have formed if we were a residents association, what would housing look like in 2053, which is like the amount of time that's passed since Home and Dry was made again, so like in the future, and imagining like a possible housing future, which has been really like, partly because we're trying to work out what we're going to do with the project on. So the beginning parts was to speculate on possible housing futures, but there's also like a danger. I don't know, maybe danger is too strong, but in doing that with people who are having living in very difficult housing situations, to be asked to imagine possible futures that they might never be able to have access to. So I guess the idea of managing expectations within speculation is all something that I've been trying to think about carefully, I guess, and sensitively because I think to imagine something without having any of the tools to ever maybe even thinking that's possible can be quite painful. So I guess I've been thinking a lot about the kind of balancing act of imagination and the utopian possibility of what film can do, because you can do anything in it, versus like the kind of heartbreaking idea of seeing something that you're never going to possibly have. And I guess that's something that isn't resolvable necessarily, but something I've definitely been thinking through, like you say, because video does have this potential to like represent things that don't exist, which is what that sort of bubble scene is in Home and Dry, right? They get a chance to imagine these things, which, like, one of the things that's come out of this speculative exercise is like a bedroom for everybody is one of our like slogans, and like it seems so basic, but the idea of everyone having a bedroom feels like right now for a lot of people it feels like a far off dream. Yes, I think that's one of the other reasons which I haven't really touched on yet, which is, which I'm glad you brought up, is like the potential for video to represent possible futures feels really powerful, but to be careful with where that, because go back to Schitt's Creek, like we don't live in that world, and it's also can be very painful to see something that you can never really have access to. So yeah, I'm just kind of I'm negotiating that at the moment. Does anyone have anything, Jerry or Tamima, anyone add to that idea of speculation?
Don't know, Tamima.
Yeah, I think that question, it needs to be carefully thought about, and I'm not able to come up with an answer now.
It's a hard one, right? Like it's a complicated. Yeah.
I think that's also like the question of vision is also makes like a current moment more difficult. I mean, I was watching like these old Glasgow corporation films, like from the 1940s and 50s and 60s, was like a very, very clear vision of what was happening in Glasgow. Now, there's obviously a massive debate about all those changes, you know, what slum demolition meant, what, like, you know, building tower blocks meant, but there was like a clear vision of a housing future based on the current condition. And there's a famous, like, Oscar Marzaroli film at Glasgow 1980, made in 1970. It was like, I mean, it's a cool video, but it's like horrifically wrong idea, you know, of what Glasgow was going to be like in 10 years.
Right.
You know, but a clear vision was being articulated, like, from above about what was happening. Whereas now, it's like, what is the vision of Glasgow City Council? What is happening? Where is the film about the transformational regeneration areas? You know, or where, you know, where is Mears' vision of how it's just presented as this kind of natural process without any politics behind it, without any debate. It just happens, and it's difficult to see it. You know, it's difficult to fight it because it doesn't even seem to be happening. But this change is happening on an equally massive scale, but it just happens. You know, so I think it's like trying to articulate our own vision and also trying to expose the vision that is behind what is currently happening in Glasgow, because it seems to just, like, you know what I mean? It seems to be this neutral process. It's hard, you know, is anything even happening?
I guess that points to like the fear of promising, right, and like the kind of short-term politics that we live in, I guess, at the current moment. I feel like we should be wrapping up soon, based on on the time, but also but I guess I wanted to, like, there's a saying, I guess, in activist circles, right, like, I think it's like you can't dream it if you can't see it, and you can't, I guess, is that a saying? Or you can't see it if you can't, no, yeah, if you can't see it, then you can't dream. Like, it's not like we have to, like, imagine possible futures up to a certain extent to put them into being. And if I would rather groups who are impacted directly did that rather than city councils, I guess, as well. So I think it can be exciting to imagine possible futures, but within a context where it feels like it's possible as well in some way, which is difficult. I guess I didn't want to end on such a, I guess it's very real. It's like a real thing we're going through. And I think to, like, question those things and to ask where those assumptions come from. And like what Joe is pointing to is the lack of transparency in so many of these decision-making processes feels so alienating. So to find ways to, like, question those and to have more conversations about developments in our neighborhoods and to ask who decided to make them happen as well feels really important. I don't know if that's really like a wrapping up moment. I'm usually quite good at finding a wrapping up moment, but maybe this is fine to not have a really good wrapping up moment. But I really appreciate everyone sticking around for almost 2 hours on a Sunday morning into afternoon to I guess to be involved in this period of research and to, like, and hopefully we'll feedback more later on in the year as things continue to develop. But I don't know if Joey and Tamima want to add anything, or Sam or Kitty, to the ending bit.
I think, well, just to say quickly, I mean, is there a way that people can kind of contribute to your project before kind of the next public?
So we're going to have another, like, 4 meetings, and then there'll be another public moment in May time, I guess, is the next thing we've got planned, unless anything else comes up in the meantime. Announcements are just usually made, like, on the social media pages of, like, the groups involved. So it's like Grand Union in Birmingham, Nottingham Contemporary, and in each of those cities, I guess it's also working with, like, Acorn. I've just forgotten, what's the name of your housing co-op, Chris? I've just totally forgotten.
It's actually cooperative development.
Yeah, in Nottingham, Birmingham. No, you're in Birmingham. Yeah, Acorn in Nottingham, and then we work with Granby in Liverpool, and Rule of Threes in Liverpool, and then with Wash and Lux Scotland in Glasgow. So there's different ways. So we'll be posting things on there when things sort of come up. Kitty, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to do a plug for the other event that we're doing with Document. So just to let everyone know that we're also screening a film by Mika Reversa, which was meant to be over, but it's been extended till the end.
I really recommend it.
Plug over.
But thanks for your support, and thanks for Document for giving us an opportunity to have a public moment. But yeah, and thanks again so much to Joe and Tamima for, like, engaging with these kind of complicated and difficult questions, I guess, around representation, storytelling, history making, and the translation of, like, politics and experience into something that could be shared as well. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Joey, and thanks, Tamima. Do you have any plugs you want to do? Anything, any shout outs? join your local union, support WASH.
Exactly, join your local union, support WASH.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
Thanks,
if
everyone.
people, yeah, if people have got video equipment, filmmaking experience, you know, does that help us make some films?
Great. So it hasn't put you off making films, at least, Joe. You still want to do it. Just got to work out what they're going to be about.
I mean, absolutely not me personally, but collective we.
Great. Thanks so much. Nice to see all your faces. Enjoy your days, and yeah, thanks again for everyone for being here for the chat. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.